Not be wise for him, the U.S. president, to be seen as meddling in the Iranian election, but there are others, including Republican lawmakers, who are urging him to do more to bolster the protesters in Iran. Joining me now is Democratic strategist Debbie Dingell and Republican strategist Phil Musser. So we'll open up this debate. I should mention that the House, Republican Congressman Mike Pence and Democratic Congressman Howard Berman have introduced a resolution today throwing their support behind the protesters in Iran. And I want to play you what Congressman Pence said on the floor of the House today.
The American cause is freedom, and in this cause the American people will not be silent, here or abroad. If the President of the United States won't express the unqualified support of our nation for the dissidents in the streets of Tehran, this Congress must.
Phil, I'll start with you. Congressman Pence obviously taking a swipe at the president there, but you heard what Senator Nelson said a few minutes ago. You know, the president is different. It's one thing for the House to use some of this rhetoric, that the president has to be a little more careful. Do you disagree with that?
Well, 405 to 1 is a pretty powerful statement by, the lower house of the, United States government. And, Mike Pence, I think, speaks probably to the heart of what all Americans believe. I think just following us here in the next few minutes, the White House is going to be under extraordinary pressure to kind of reevaluate how they've approached this to date. But, I'm willing to cede the point that there are, people who are, I don't think people doubt the best interests in terms of intent of the president, but there's no question that with the crackdown in recent days and the statements you've seen out of Khamenei on Friday, pressure is going to continue to escalate here domestically on the president to do something more aggressive. And there's no question, I'm sure he's looking at a lot of things, public and private, that we don't see. But the pressure certainly is going to be ratcheted up, Savannah.
Well, Debbie, let me ask you about that. A lot of folks, frankly, do. And as Phil points out, this was a bipartisan resolution today. A lot of folks feel the president should be more forceful in his rhetoric. What's your response to that?
Well, I think Senator Nelson talked about it very well. I think the fact of the matter is he is our commander-in-chief, and he does have to approach this from a different angle. The House of Representatives is the House of the people, and all of us are for freedom of speech, and all of us are very concerned about what we're seeing in Iran. But the president's our commander-in-chief, and we've got to worry about what's happening in Iran. We've got to worry about the impact on foreign policy, and I think we've all got to be very careful to give him the freedom and the latitude to keep us safe and to keep the world safe, but to also show the Iranians who are out there expressing the freedom of speech that the United States is supporting them.
But, Debbie, even some folks inside the administration worry. They don't want the president to be on the wrong side of history.
Well, I think he's walking a very thin line, but I think we all have to be careful while we are showing support as a people for that freedom. And we found our own freedom in the United States by being supported by people in other countries. That this is foreign policy. Probably it's most sensitive, and it's also about all of our security. So we got to be careful not to form foreign policy on cable network talk shows and on blogs, etc., but to let the president, with his advisors who know what they're doing, do what's right for this country.
Let's move on to health care. I'll read you something that Tom Daschle, somebody who knows a bit about this subject, wrote in the Politico today. He said, quote, the bipartisan health care reform is possible, and he said, quote, this crisis in our health care system has led to an unprecedented political consensus regarding the need for reform. As a former Senate Majority Leader, I don't make this statement lightly. Partisan differences are often as substantive as they are political, and compromise can be difficult. But it is also true that the status quo is no longer viable. I want to ask both of you about the risks, frankly, and please speak frankly, about the risks to each of your parties for not doing bipartisan reform. Starting with you, Phil. I mean, do Republicans really want to be out of this? If there's real change coming, don't Republicans want to be part of it?
I think it depends a little bit on what the shape of the bill looks like, Savannah. If it's really something that's going to completely obliterate the private sector, then Republicans are probably better to be out of it. But the bottom line is no. As an issue, health care is critical to the concerns of most mainstream Americans. Republicans, have ideas in this debate. Generally, they involve, choice, control, things that focus on cost, and they've put forward some interesting ideas. So I hope that the Democrats in the House give the Republicans a chance to participate. Certainly, the debate on this thing is going to happen in the Senate. And yes, to your question, Republicans absolutely should be involved in this, because bipartisan health care reform is something that is going to produce a intrinsically much better result than a one-party jam that's driven by a timeline. And if that happens, I predict it will ultimately blow up completely.
And Debbie, same question to you. We all know the Democrats have in their back pocket a procedural option this fall to basically push health care through, ram it through with 51 votes. But what would be the risk to do that? Do Democrats really want to go it alone on health care?
No, they absolutely don't want to go it alone. The fact of the matter is we have a crisis in this country, and I think everybody, Republican and Democrats, agree the health care system is broke. And I think in this country, every American deserves the right to affordable health care. We're not going to obliterate the private option. What the Democrats are offering today in the House is the beginning of a dialogue where they very much hope Republicans will come to the table. It has an option for those that want to keep their private insurance to keep their private insurance. It has a public health option. But this is the beginning of a dialogue. Hopefully Republicans will stay at the table and we'll talk and we'll finally give them every American what they deserve, affordable health care.
All right, Democrat Debbie Dingell. Phil, go real fast.
Well, I was just going to say I totally agree with Debbie on that last point. I think she's right on. The thing that this is ultimately going to be, your viewers need to understand, is watch process, because when the numbers came out about cost, and then all of a sudden increasing ease about America's view of how government is growing under Obama, that has a potential to mobilize a lot of interests in this town that haven't been active, and that is the real scary thing for the debate about health care.
All right, Phil Musser and Debbie Dingell, thanks so much for your views today.
Thanks, Savannah.
Thank you.
Well, we'll talk more in depth about this health care reform plan coming up. Can President Obama push it forward? We break it down with Jim Vandehei from Politico.